title.
You're on, Sue.
Oh, good. Hello and welcome to the Third Option International Chat Series, live chat series. I'm Sue Pinto, the Assistant Director, and along with my husband, who is again here managing the Facebook feed for us, so that if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to send something. We'd be happy to get to as many as possible throughout the evening. We're continuing our discussion again with the directors of the Third Option International, Mike and Andrea Buckley. Thank you again and happy Easter.
Happy Easter, Randy and Sue, and everyone else that's out there. Glad to be here.
Good to see you today. Hope you enjoyed your day with your family.
We did.
Even if it was on Zoom.
Even if it was on Zoom. Yes, there were a lot of Zoom family Easters going on today. I have no doubt, but it was very fun. We had a good time. So before we do get into tonight's topic, which is responsibility and the blame game, I want to just quickly go back and review last week's topic, which was building a climate of respect. And the reason being is that if this were an actual third option program and a third option meeting, that first hour would be dedicated to reviewing last week's topic. It allows the couples to maybe share what they worked on during the week, if they had any success, or maybe if they still struggled, or it's just a nice opportunity to review what was learned last week. So if anybody does have anything, any viewers out there who do want to share something, again, please feel free to message our Facebook feed or put a comment, and we'd love to hear from you. In the meantime, Mike and Andrea, can you just give us the top takeaways from last week's topic of building a climate of respect?
Sure. When we look at our third option program, there's his way, there's her way, and that third option is somewhere in the middle. We look at it as a balance beam. Sometimes one person has these traits, the other spouse has traits that are completely opposite. And when we go to communicate and try to understand each other, we've got to meet somewhere in the middle. But what we started with was the love means we give our spouse the right. It's the Bill of Rights for marriage. Just like we reviewed last week, it was a Bill of Rights for our country. Well, this is the Bill of Rights for our spouse. And, we gave rights to space and privacy, to be different, to disagree, benefit of the doubt, to be told the truth, different things. There's like 10 of them: to be consulted, to be imperfect, to make mistakes, and to courteous and honorable treatment. And when we do give that to our spouse, that means we are treating them with respect, and it's foundational. If we don't get off on the right foot in our communication, in the way we treat each other, by being respectful, then everything else is going to go right into the ditch. It's just the way it is. Through all the third option programs that we've attended, that's how we found that this building that climate of respect is so important, so foundational, so that we're able to go in the right direction. How we treat each other, granting each other these rights, regardless of how we feel. When we let our feelings take over our decisions, we almost always make the wrong decision. And politeness and tact are not just for strangers. It really means we should treat each other that way. And boy, I make a lot of mistakes, and sometimes I'll let loose. I did it this week, and somebody let me know it. But those are the things, their tendencies are there, but how quickly we respond by saying, we didn't learn that in third option. Then we can change the way we behave and change the way we act in a certain situation. So when we look at respect as a balance, we don't want people that are overly aggressive. We don't respect others. We're disrespectful. That's the wrong end to be on. And then if people are too passive and we don't respect ourselves, that means we take all that abuse from the other person emotionally. What we are trying to learn in the third option is to be assertive, to stand up for ourselves in a respectful way, to say it nice. And that's what we're trying to do in that first session about building that climate of respect. And it's about respecting ourselves, and it's about respecting that other person.
And it's so true that, like you said, those feelings, those emotions that can really kind of take over, and it causes us to lash out. And then we start down the path of lack of respect. And actually, then it leads beautifully, not beautifully, unfortunately, I guess you could say, into the next topic, which is responsibility and the blame game. You know, those feelings can take us down right into this path of you're the one, it's your fault, that sort of thing. So this week, you know, with every topic, there are two extremes. So when we're talking about responsibility in and the blame game, how what are the two extremes, and then how do the couples come to meet in the middle, to come together as opposed to staying far apart?
Well, responsibility in the blame game. It sounds like it would be fun, but when you find and identify yourselves as a couple or in a relationship playing this blame game, it isn't fun. But what it usually sounds like is what we identify in third option as an accusing you. Somewhere in the way we're communicating with each other, we use the word you, use judgmental words, could have, should have, would have, blaming, insinuating, and sometimes even pointing the finger when we get into a discussion with each other. And we call that the blame game. We can find ourselves identified with a Peter Pan, let's use that figure personality, kind of antiquated for young people, might not know that story, but always wanting to be fun and young and carefree and no responsibilities. So, you know, we identify that as one end of the balance line. And on the other end, we have the person, which happens to be me, a lot of the times in the relationship, that's overly responsible. Things from childhood, just patterns of behavior that we learn over the years. Some of us are very serious, we're very responsible. However, way at that extreme of being overly responsible, you can have feelings of resentment. You can also have feelings of judgment towards other people for not helping bear those responsibilities. And you can even find yourself in a situation where you're enabling the relationship to be that way. So in some ways, you're part of the problem by being over responsible.
You know, you went from Atlas, the mighty Atlas, the strong person, to Peter Pan, the dreamer. I'm kind of a dreamer at times, I've been told anyway. And, you know, I'm going to give a more current example that people really don't like, but it's very true. When we look at the state of affairs in our country right now, going through this pandemic, we see where going into this pandemic, our president was being put up to an impeachment, and he was impeached. And it's all about blaming him for what he did or did not do. And of course, his response, or I'm going to say more his reaction, more of an emotional reaction from both sides, the Democrat and the Republican, was to say, you're to blame, it's your fault, okay? And then we get to the pandemic, and they're still blaming about how are we going to fund all of these different funding mechanisms to get us out of this economic mess that we have, or even pay for the healthcare equipment that we're looking for, the PPEs. Well, you know, do we as Americans want to watch this game? It's exactly what we're talking about, responsibility in the blame game. What we're looking for as Americans is to have this settled without blaming anybody. Just get to the solutions and do the right thing. It's exactly what this whole theme tonight is about, responsibility in the blame game. And the blame and shame has to stop, or else, again, we go right into that ditch.
Right. It doesn't work. And you know, blaming the other person is really avoiding our own responsibility when it come right down to it. And the problems never get solved. Enabling the other part that I mentioned, we had a little skit that we used to do about having two people together, one sick in bed, not wanting to get up, not sick in bed, excuse me, in bed, the two people. And the man leans over and says to his wife, will you call my boss today? You know, I just don't want to go into work. Will you call and tell him I'm sick? And the other person says, okay, dear, I'll go make that phone call for you. So we have little things like that to remind ourselves that we should never do for someone else what they can and should do for themselves. You know, that's something to really think about. There's a lot of times, not just with each other, but with other people, that in the name of helping or being responsible, we're really doing things for others that they can and should do for themselves. So we then in the class, and I think it's important to kind of redo the skits and say, well, what could you have done? How could you do that differently? Could you find a way to say, well, you know, I can understand that maybe you don't feel like going today. If that's the case, maybe you can call in and use a sick day, or, you know, find a way that you're going to handle that. You don't have to have someone put you in a situation. You have a choice. You don't have to be an enabler.
So when you do talk about, so if we're talking about those two extremes, and if we go back to that whiteboard, looking at the two extremes, the irresponsible, what are some of those solutions? If you find that you're on that end, and if you recognize, which is always, I think the first step is recognizing on what end you're at, you know, what are some solutions to help you become less irresponsible? What do you suggest at that point?
Well, a lot of it is how we communicate to each other. When we use that accusatory you and point that finger, that hurts. That hurts that other person. And even though the person that's pointing the finger thinks, well, I got power over this person now, so I'm going to go in for the jugular. That help us improve our relationship, our marriage, our family? It doesn't. One of the ways that we learn to control that impulse is by using I statements. I feel neglected when you say that I'm not doing things right. I feel hurt. I feel very confused when you try to tell me things that I don't really understand. By using the I statement and using emotional words like feelings, like hurt or disturbed or confused, you're not going back to the other person with a gotcha. It's saying that you're sharing something in you that really is important without putting that other person on the defensive. And when we do that, that's an opening for us to reconcile, for us to get to that middle so that we can begin the process of healing those hurtful issues that come up in our lives.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's a throwback to the Bill of Rights. This is workshop number 2, but we're building on workshop number 1. Sometimes when I become that person who uses the accusing you, and I identify myself, I'm looking to put blame somewhere. It's because I have to go underneath that and look inside myself and say, do I not feel heard? Do I not am I not exercising that right? Is that my right to be understood? Well, if it's my right to be understood, I also have to communicate. I have to speak. I have the right to speak. And oftentimes we can sit back and really stuff down a lot of things because we're not using our rights in the way we should. I'm not trying to talk to Mike in a conversation that is polite and respectful and courteous. I'm suppressing it until all of a sudden it comes out in a blaming you statement. And it almost always escalates. When it comes out like that, it goes back and forth. And why are you being like that? Boy, you're in a bad mood, and so on and so forth. So by using I statements, for example, I used one today. I feel overwhelmed, but I was mad for an hour before. And Mike said, well, you look like you're in a real fine mood. And so then I said, well, you something or other. And then I stopped, afterwards, and I apologized, and I started over. And I started over with the I statement. I said, I just feel overwhelmed. And I said, what I really need is for you to understand how overwhelmed I feel. So sometimes it's saying the same thing 2 or 3 times, but really trying hard to not use the word you or should, would, could. And taking it one step further, the other thing we try to practice, and everybody can try to practice this. Sometimes the other person, you can get to the end of that suggestion and they still don't quite know what to do. So then you could say, my hope would be, hey, we've got this issue and I'm blaming or he's blaming. Well, what do you want from me? Well, my hope that would be the next time, if I feel this way, it would really help to hear the words such and such, or it would help for this to happen rather than to use the words you. Makes the world a difference. The other person's demeanor starts to de-escalate, and they're more approachable, and you're more willing to come to some type of an understanding.
So I'm hearing some steps here. One would be to stop, recognize that blaming, sort of poking the finger, stop, recognize that, and do a redo. There's that redo. Say, oh, I'm gonna redo this, and go back to doing I statements. And then thirdly is to maybe give that suggestion, oh, well, I hope. So it's stopping, recognizing, redo, and then I hope for next time, or something like that. Does that kind of sum up what you're talking about there?
It does, Sue. It really does, because we've got to remember, marriage is trying to be on the same team. And we're not on the same team, and we're pointing those fingers and blaming and shaming, we're just going backwards. And everybody wants to be a winner, but if we win at someone else's expense, you're both losers. And we're going to talk about that at a later date about conflict resolution. But we want to be winners on the same team and attack the problem, not the person. And that's where we always get into the most serious trouble. And you're right about this redo. Redo thing is, okay, I caught myself coming out with the emotion and blaming and shaming. Let me say this another way, so that you take the pressure off that, and then, okay, let's try to de-escalate right away. Randy, I'm sorry, did you want to say something?
No, that's all right. I think that the most important thing that that I took away from what you said right there is, that I believe and I feel, is we forget we're on the same team, right? This happens a lot. We're all in the same boat. We're all rowing the same direction. We're all want the same thing. We want to be on the same team, and that's the biggest gap right there. That's where it starts to go like this and devolve into the situations you described. So yes, that to me is the key.
Yes, and both people on either end of this topic, the middle ground is for the overly responsible person to reevaluate and only be responsible for themselves. Our goal in the middle is self-responsibility. So if I'm too responsible, I have to learn and look at all those things on my plate and say, well, which ones really are in my wheelhouse that really are my tasks to take care of. And if they're not, I've got to learn to back off and let other people take their responsibilities. And if Mike is on the other side or vice versa, and if you're not responsible enough, I think that person has to examine their situations and say, look, I'm not pulling my load. It's my responsibility to call my boss. It's my responsibility to clean my room or whatever the tasks are, and then move towards the middle and step up and become self-responsible. If we both do that, I mean, that is our goal, to be on the same team, feel like that other person is doing their self-work too.
Well, and I'm glad you said that, Andrea, because it's real easy for everybody to point at the irresponsible. People think that's where all the trouble comes from, and it's equally on both sides of that balance beam. I think they're equally responsible for problems or imbalance, right?
So that overly responsible has to be willing to give up some of the control, be willing to appreciate the efforts, be willing to ask for help. And even if the bathroom wasn't cleaned exactly how I would do it, hey, I gave it up and I, said, yeah, I need help. And hey, he stepped up and he did it. And yay, thankful for that, without going into this was wrong, this was not right. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think if you just identified a lot of the conflicts in many homes is that overly responsible person is a little bit of a perfectionist. So, you can have a complex, well, I'll just do it all myself. And you drive the other person more to the other end to do less responsibilities because it's never going to be quite good enough. So that's something I've had to look at and say, look, here's your choice. You can, like you said, put those needs out there, let other people step up and do their part. And, that's okay. It doesn't have to be exactly how we would do it.
Caring for our spouse or husband or wife is different than taking care of them, because we're not fix-it people to take care of their problems. We find the same thing with our kids. We want to make sure that everything in life goes so smoothly for them that we'll do it for them. Well, we're digging a hole for them to jump out of someday if we're doing that. And those are the things that we just do unconsciously, and it gets us into trouble. So we want to be empathetic to our spouse when they struggle with something, but it's up to them to fix it. They got to find a way to do it, and we can encourage them. We can't do it for them, or else again, we're just traveling down that same road. And if we're doing the same thing over and over again, we're not getting the solution that we desire.
Right.
I know we're kind of touching the surface here. This topic really could go a lot deeper. There's a lot of us with childhood baggage and things that have happened to us in our lives that may really promote certain personality tendencies with responsibility, over responsibility or under responsibility, and how that works with codependency and how that works, in the third option, we've learned over the years, sometimes you need to go to support groups. There's a lot of things that are available, Al-Anon and other crisis groups. So if you're working with a third option group somewhere, you can always approach the facilitator. They have names of counselors. If anybody's listening and they would like the names or guidance there, you could email on Facebook to Sue, and we could research and find names to, set you in the right direction. We're talking on the level right now of day-to-day type things, but this topic really can get people very deep and off track. So if you think that that's something that you need, and you really asking for help, like we said the last time, is a sign of strength.
Mm-hmm.
So there's help available. There's books and there's good counselors.
Well, and I'm glad you said that, Andrea, because it's a good reminder for us that this is really just kind of an overview and summary of the topic. So
Yes.
By no means do we want anybody to think that this is delving into the full breadth of the topic discussion we're going to have. This is really a condensed version. Just a reminder, the program and the series have the full topic, and we're just doing a light version of it right here in this discussion.
Yes, and we talked earlier, these are times with the virus and all. A lot of us have cabin fever. We've been home a lot. you know, you can love your spouse, but, you know, we're 24/7 in the trenches now, all of us, no matter how long you've been married and what your circumstances. A lot of us are shut in at home. So these are issues that are going to be brewing under the surface. Who's doing what, and how we treat each other, and how are we communicating about this? So I just think it's a very appropriate time to be talking about a few of these skills.
The third option program, in a nutshell, is about self-change. Andrea tried to change me when we first got married to become the person she wanted me to be. I tried the same thing with her, and everybody does that, but it doesn't work. We all know that. But now with all this time on our hands, sitting at home, trying to figure out what's going on out in that world when we're able to get back, this is a great opportunity to be able to take advantage of self-reflection, looking at these types of programs, all the different topics that we talk about. And we have to change the way we look at things in order to make progress. Self-change is hard work. It doesn't happen quickly. And if someone is under the gun of a more powerful person, people are trying to be that assertive person to stand up for themselves in order to be treated fairly and honestly. And when we don't make those changes, it just keeps that problem kicking it right down the road. And we have to make a stand in a respectful way. So the blaming and the shaming, if we've been used to seeing that happen so often, we have to take a stand to try to stop that behavior with as much respect as we can. And when we know which side of that beam we're on, if we're the blamer and shamer and person that really is almost abusive to that other one, or if we're the one that's taking it all in and not standing up for ourselves, you know, we're just not going to make the changes necessary to make the relationship, the marriage grow. And those are the things that we're talking about in the third option program.
And Mike, that brings me to just to take a quick pause before we sort of head into the last part of this discussion tonight, that the third option international on our website, www.thethirdoption.com, is offering a discount on the streaming service, because with the pandemic, unfortunately, right now we are not mailing out the DVDs or the manuals to organizations that might want to set up the program. However, we are offering a discount on the streaming option. So you can absolutely get a discount on the series, download it. You can watch it at home right on your computer or iPhone or whatever option you have. And hopefully that will just help people during this time. You know, they can watch it during the week. They can join us on Sundays. They can go back to our videos on our Facebook page and rewatch the videos just to kind of reinforce what they see on the video. And of course, if we have any questions or if anybody wants to comment or send us anything, we are happy to bring any of those questions to Mike and Andrea, and just to get their thoughts, get their advice, get their pick their brain a little bit. But what we do want to go into next is, now that we've discussed this topic, we've talked about the Peter Pan and the Atlas, or the irresponsible end of the spectrum, to the overly responsible, and trying to get to that third option, trying to meet in the middle of being self-responsible. And as a matter of fact, I just chatted with my kids about this today. You would be very, very proud, because I did use this third option lesson to discuss this with my kids today. Many socks on the floors upstairs. But what I wanted to is, you know, we want to talk about, what can people do this week? What questions do we need to ask ourselves this week in relation to ourselves, but also in relationship to our partner? You know, what do we have to think about?
Oh, you're asking us?
Yeah.
I am.
Well, to wrap it up for this session, there's some things we'd like to leave listeners thinking about. My response is my responsibility. So that's one to kind of ponder about. The accusing you and the responsible I statements, you know, what, if we notice what types of thing are we talking about in our language, do we find ourselves using those you words, shoulda, woulda, coulda? And also refuse to get hooked on the bait. In other words, sometimes there's just red flags that someone puts out there. The way they say it to you, you just want to like knee-jerk reaction. Like if somebody hits you, taking your reflexes in your knee. And knowing and preparing for some of these things in the lesson help us to not take the bait. Just don't go for it. Instead, think, okay, what's the real problem here? So that's something that we can do. And again, we can't fix everything. We can't be Mr. and Mrs. Fix It for the world. Can't be the rescuer, like 911, everybody to the rescuer. And what that does is it doesn't allow people to grow and to change. So we have to avoid trying to be the fix-it person. Those are the things I would ask ourselves in self-reflection. And do we blame others for things that are within ourselves? I know sometimes it'll come out with me, with Mike, I'll say things and then I'll say, you know what? I'm just upset with myself. Well, I got to start thinking that before I dump and say some of the things I've already said to him. But also from the spouse's side, there's some questions here that you can reflect on. Would you like to share those?
Sure. We need to take inventory of what we're responsible for or not responsible for. I think we really need to take time to reflect. When we look at that balance beam, am I just a dreamer and I let the other person do all the work, or vice versa? Do I have to bail out that other person all the time because they just won't do it? And then I start to blame them for my lack of ability to take care of a situation. Sometimes some people do the fixing because they have a sense of superiority over that other person. Well, if you're always going to be with a winner and make them feel, you can't make them feel, but if you kind of judge them as a loser, you're not going to get anywhere with that. It's just negative behavior. So we're looking to get away from those types of things. And we can do that by using I statements. I feel disturbed. I feel confused. I feel neglected. Those are the kinds of things that it doesn't put the pressure on the other person because it's on us. When we use that takes the stress out of the situation. Because we're taking it away from that accusing you to I and my emotions. And we just want to be more responsible in areas of our lives. It makes us feel good when we can take care of things ourselves rather than dumping it on somebody else. It's kind of childish behavior, and we need to get away from that and build ourselves up and build our marriage up to go forward.
Excellent. Yeah, no, great. That's all wonderful. All of the questions are valid. All of the suggestions are valid. And again, everything, we don't want it to be, we don't want people to think that this is all separate, topic 1, topic 2, that they're all, they combine, they interweave. And, it may be going back to that, like you said before, Andrea, going back to that first topic, thinking back to the Bill of Rights. Well, am I really, allowing my spouse or my partner this time and privacy and space, or am I doing this? And we have to kind of go back in between both of these topics, and there's 12 other topics along here, so they will interweave. Thank you for bringing this topic to us this week. Thank you for sharing your own personal stories and challenges, and we're always thrilled to have you here. It's extremely helpful. This program inside and out. Next week, we will be talking about topic 3, which is understanding expectations. So do you have a little tidbit about that real quick, do you think?
Well, sometimes it's dangerous to have too many expectations, because when we do, and they don't come out, we're very disappointed. So that will be part of the theme of that topic on expectations.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about the uns
Yeah, the uns.
or uns.
The four uns. We'll get into
All
that.
right.
But I'd like to just leave people with this thought. Here we are sitting home, we're probably watching a lot of TV, a lot of videos. Maybe we're getting to read, who knows? But if people would take the time to look at the Third Option website, thirdoption.com, and look especially at the streaming version. Generally, it's been $89. It's been a pretty good value. But because of the pandemic, we took a $40 discount to that. So it's 49 bucks. You can't buy really a nice dinner for that. You certainly can't buy a good pair of sneakers for 49 bucks. But I really think that if people take a look and make that little investment to stream this Third Option program at home, it'll be time well spent. You have the time to do it. It's one of those things that we look at each other and say, are we ready to call it quits? Or are we ready to do something about it to become how we used to be when we were dating and first married? If we can get away from that disillusion and misery and get to that rebuilding part again, that's, I think, something that's worth taking a look at, because we did find something in that person, however many years ago it was. And that spark is still there. We have to sometimes fight to get it back. And the Third Option streaming series can help us do that.
I'd like to add too that we will be making a lot of changes, I think, in our lives going forward when this ends. And if people would take the time to practice what are in these short segments that are on the downloadable version, and to actually take one of these questions, even if they took one of these questions once a week and sat down and made that a change, something that they were going to do for themselves, challenge themselves to do just one thing, and going forward, build on that, that could become a wonderful tradition or a part of their
Good habit.
relationship.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, because with everything going on, whether people have lost their jobs, kids are home, trying to manage learning how to do online schooling, parents are trying to manage helping them through that process. And then if, we're struggling in our relationships, it can all be overwhelming. So yes, I think that's wonderful. You know what? Just start one little step, just one little step. That's all we can, sometimes that's just how it begins. And that's okay. Just starting with a little step is a great way to start. And so I agree. I thank you for that. Randy, did you want to add something?
No, just as you say, take one step, because it's a process. It's a process. It's a journey. It's not a flipping a switch and making changes. It takes a little time, a little work, but it's a process.
Right. And the streaming for that, I believe the code to receive the discount is SAVE40, SAVE 40. So feel free to do that, get that download, and check out our program every Sunday. Go on the Facebook page, look at the previous videos we have, take one little step. And I think you'll be on the right path. Mike and Andrea, thank you again. Happy Easter. We wish you and your family well. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Same to you both.
Thanks, Randy and Sue,
Good
and everyone
night.
out there.
Good night.